"Pack your bags, Mom. He's gone. Now it's your turn." My son Derek's words hit me like ice water as I stood in my own kitchen, still wearing the black dress from yesterday's funeral. Go die somewhere else. The sound of my coffee mug shattering against the kitchen floor was nothing compared to the sound of my heart breaking. But you know what? Sometimes the cruelest betrayals lead to the most unexpected discoveries. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me take you back to how this nightmare began. 3 days earlier, I was Margaret Walsh, 68, devoted wife of 42 years to Thomas Walsh, mother to 3 children, grandmother to 5. I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I belonged. I was wrong about everything. Thomas had been sick for 8 months. Pancreatic cancer, they called it. I'd spent every single day by his side, holding his hand through chemo, pretending I didn't notice how his wedding ring had become too loose on his finger. The hospital became my second home, and the nurses knew my coffee order by heart. "Mrs. Walsh," Dr. Peterson had said on that final Tuesday morning, "we've made him as comfortable as possible. It's time to call the family." Derek arrived first, of course. My eldest son, 45, successful lawyer, always dressed like he was headed to court even on weekends. He took charge immediately, barking orders about arrangements, talking to doctors in hushed tones, while I sat beside Thomas, stroking his silver hair. "Margaret, you should go home and rest," Derek said, not even looking at me. "I'll handle everything here." "I'm not leaving him," I replied firmly. Thomas and I had promised each other decades ago, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. I meant every word. Derek's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He never argued directly with me, not then. He saved his real feelings for later, when he thought I couldn't hear, when he was on the phone with his wife Sharon about the burden of caring for Mother now. Thomas passed away at 3:17 a.m. on Thursday morning. I was holding his hand when his breathing simply stopped. After 42 years of marriage, I felt like half of my soul had been ripped away. But I had no time to grieve properly because Derek immediately took over. "The funeral home needs decisions now, Mom. What kind of casket? What flowers? What burial plot?" Everything became a whirlwind of arrangements I barely understood. Derek made most of the choices, while I sat in a fog of grief, nodding when prompted, signing papers I didn't read. Thomas had always handled our finances, our important paperwork. I trusted Derek to do right by his father's memory. The funeral was everything Thomas would have hated. Too formal, too expensive, too much show. But Derek insisted on giving Dad the send-off he deserved, which apparently meant spending a fortune on flowers and a mahogany casket that cost more than most people's cars. After the service, people came back to our house. My house, technically, though it had never felt like just mine before. Friends from Thomas's work, neighbors, relatives I hadn't seen in years. Everyone kept saying the same things. "He's in a better place. At least he's not suffering anymore. You were such a devoted wife." Devoted wife. Yes, I had been. Devoted to the point of losing myself completely in someone else's life. I'd given up my teaching career when Derek was born, given up my dreams of writing, given up my independence piece by piece until I wasn't Margaret anymore. I was just Thomas's wife, Derek's mother, everyone's helper, but nobody's priority. That night, after everyone left, after the dishes were done and the leftover casseroles stored in the refrigerator, I sat alone in my living room and truly felt the silence for the first time. Thomas's chair sat empty, still indented from years of him sitting there reading his newspapers. His reading glasses were still on the side table where he'd left them the morning he went to the hospital for the last time. Derek had stayed to help with cleanup, which mostly meant he sat at the kitchen table making phone calls about settling Dad's affairs. I could hear him talking to someone about life insurance policies, about the house, about what needed to be done to get everything in order. "What do you mean the accounts are frozen?" I heard him say sharply into his phone. There has to be a way to access the funds immediately. I should have paid more attention to that conversation. I should have asked questions. But I was drowning in grief, and Derek seemed to have everything under control. He'd always been the responsible one, the one who handled complicated things. The next morning, Friday, Derek arrived at 8 a.m. sharp with coffee and a manila folder thick with papers. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, settling at my kitchen table like he owned it. I poured myself coffee with hands that still trembled slightly. What about, sweetheart? About your future. About what happens now. Something in his tone made me look up. His expression was businesslike, cold in a way I'd never seen directed at me before. I don't understand. Derek opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Dad left some debts, Mom. More than you know. The medical bills, the funeral costs, the mortgage on this place. It's going to be tight financially. My stomach dropped. How tight? Tight enough that keeping this house isn't practical. You're going to need to downsize, move somewhere more affordable, somewhere that makes sense for someone your age. Someone my age? I repeated slowly. Derek, I'm 68, not 88. I'm perfectly capable of… Mom, he interrupted me, his voice taking on the patient tone he used with difficult clients. You've never handled finances. You don't understand what's involved in maintaining a property like this. The taxes alone are going to eat up most of Dad's Social Security survivor benefits. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. Where exactly do you think I should go? Derek pulled out a brochure from his folder, sliding it across the table. Sunset Manor. It's a very nice assisted living community about an hour from here. I've already spoken with them about availability. Assisted living. I picked up the brochure with numb fingers, with smiling elderly people playing cards, walking in gardens, eating in communal dining rooms. It looked pleasant enough, but it also looked like the end of any life I'd ever known. Derek, I don't need assisted living. I can take care of myself perfectly well. Can you, Mom? When was the last time you balanced a checkbook? Paid bills? Made a major decision without Dad's help? The words stung because they were partially true. Thomas had handled our finances for decades, but that didn't mean I was incapable of learning, of taking control of my own life. I can learn, I said quietly. At 68, Mom, be realistic. It's time to let the younger generation handle the complicated stuff. Sharon and I have been talking, and we think this is the best solution for everyone. Best for everyone or best for you? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Derek's face darkened. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said quickly. This is all happening so fast. Can't we wait a few weeks? Let me process Dad's death before making major life changes? The bills don't wait, Mom. The mortgage doesn't wait. Every day we delay costs money we don't have. I felt trapped, cornered, completely out of my depth. Derek was the expert, the successful one, the one who understood legal and financial matters. How could I argue with him when I didn't even know where Thomas kept our insurance papers? I need time to think, I said finally. Derek's patience was visibly wearing thin. There's nothing to think about, Mom. This is the reality of the situation. That's when he delivered the words that changed everything. Pack your bags, Mom. He's gone. Now it's your turn. Go die somewhere else. The casual cruelty of it, the way he said it like he was asking me to take out the trash, broke something inside me. This was my son, the boy I'd rocked to sleep, helped with homework, cheered for at baseball games. This was how he saw me now, as a burden to be disposed of. After Derek left, I sat in my kitchen and cried for the first time since Thomas's diagnosis. Not the dignified tears of a grieving widow, but the raw, ugly sobs of a woman who'd just discovered that the life she'd built was nothing but an illusion. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. It gives you a solid place to push off from. I spent that entire Friday in a haze of disbelief, wandering through my house like a ghost. Every room held memories I wasn't ready to pack away. The kitchen where Thomas and I had shared morning coffee for decades. The living room where we'd watched our children grow up, where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. The bedroom where we'd whispered our dreams and fears in the darkness. How do you pack up 42 years in cardboard boxes? By Saturday morning, I'd made a decision. If Derek was right about our finances being a disaster, I needed to see for myself. Thomas had always kept his important papers in his home office, a small room off the main hallway that I rarely entered. It was his space, filled with filing cabinets and banker's boxes that seemed impossibly complicated to me. But complicated or not, it was time I learned the truth about my own life. I started with his desk, looking for bank statements, insurance papers, anything that might give me a clearer picture. What I found made my hands shake. Credit card bills with balances that made my stomach turn. Medical bills marked past due in red letters. Notices from the mortgage company that I didn't understand, but that looked ominous. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe our finances were worse than I'd imagined. That's when I found Thomas's wallet in the top desk drawer, the one the hospital had returned with his personal effects. Inside, along with his driver's license and photos of the grandchildren, was a bank card I'd never seen before. Not our regular checking account card, but something different. Something with a bank name I didn't recognize. First National Private Banking. Private banking? We'd banked at the local credit union for 30 years. What was this? I turned the card over in my fingers, studying it. It looked expensive somehow, heavier than a regular bank card, with Thomas's name embossed in gold letters. Below his name, in smaller print, were the words, Platinum Account Holder. The more I stared at this mysterious card, the more questions multiplied in my mind. If we were really in such terrible financial trouble, why did Thomas have an account with a private bank? Why had he never mentioned it? And why did Derek, who seemed to know everything about our finances, not know about this? Sunday morning, I called Derek. "Mom, it's early," he said, sounding irritated. "What do you need?" "I've been going through your father's papers," I said carefully, "and I have some questions about our finances. I told you not to worry about that stuff. It's too complicated, and it'll just stress you out." "Derek, I found a bank card I don't recognize. First National Private Banking. Do you know anything about this?" There was a pause, long enough to make me wonder if we'd been disconnected. "Derek? Oh, that old thing. Dad mentioned it once. It's probably just an old account with nothing in it. You know how he was about never throwing anything away?" But something in Derek's voice didn't sound right. He answered too quickly, too dismissively. In my 30 years of teaching, I'd learned to recognize when someone was lying, and Derek was definitely hiding something. "I think I'll go to the bank on Monday and ask them about it," I said, testing his reaction. "Mom, don't waste your time. I'm telling you, it's nothing. Focus on packing for Sunset Manor. I've already put down a deposit." "You put down a deposit without asking me?" "It was necessary to hold the spot. These places fill up fast." After I hung up, I sat in Thomas's chair and stared at that mysterious bank card. Derek had lied to me. I was sure of it. But why? What was he hiding? Monday morning, I dressed carefully in my best navy blue suit, the one I wore to church on special occasions. If I was going to walk into a private bank and demand answers, I was going to look like I belonged there. First National Private Banking was located downtown in a building I'd driven past 1,000 times but never entered. The lobby was all marble and brass, with crystal chandeliers and the kind of quiet that comes from serious money. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, looked at me with polite but distant professionalism. "How may I help you?" I placed Thomas's bank card on her desk. "My husband recently passed away, and I found this among his belongings. I'd like to speak with someone about his account." Her expression changed immediately when she saw the card. The polite distance disappeared, replaced by something like reverence. "Oh my, yes, of course. Please, have a seat. I'll get Mr. Harrison immediately." Mr. Harrison turned out to be a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a way of speaking that suggested he was used to dealing with very important people. He escorted me to a private office that was larger than my living room, with leather furniture and oil paintings on the walls. "Mrs. Walsh," he said, settling behind his massive wooden desk. "First, please accept my condolences on your husband's passing. Thomas was a valued client for many years." "Many years?" I repeated. "How many years exactly?" Mr. Harrison consulted his computer screen. "Mr. Walsh opened his accounts with us in 1995. Nearly 30 years. My heart started beating faster. "Accounts? Plural?" "Yes, he maintained several accounts with us. Checking, savings, investment portfolios, and a safety deposit box." I felt like the room was spinning. "Mr. Harrison, I think there's been a mistake. My husband and I banked at Riverside Credit Union. We've never had accounts here." He looked at me with genuine sympathy. "Mrs. Walsh, many of our clients prefer to keep their private banking arrangements confidential, even from family members. It's not unusual." "Confidential from family members?" I could barely get the words out. "Are you telling me my husband had secret bank accounts?" "I'm telling you that your husband was a very wealthy man, Mrs. Walsh, and now, as his beneficiary, you are a very wealthy woman." The world stopped. Completely stopped. "I'm sorry. What did you say? Mr. Harrison turned his computer screen toward me, and what I saw made my knees weak. Numbers. Lots of numbers. More numbers than I'd ever imagined having in one place. This can't be right, I whispered, staring at the screen. This says $2.3 million in liquid assets, Mr. Harrison confirmed gently, plus the investment portfolio, which is currently valued at approximately $5.8 million. And of course, there are the real estate holdings. Real estate holdings? 3 rental properties here in town, plus the vacation home in Colorado that your husband purchased last year. I gripped the arms of my leather chair, feeling like I might faint. Mr. Harrison, there's been a terrible mistake. We don't have vacation homes. We don't have millions of dollars. We're in debt. My son says we're broke, Mr. Harrison frowned, studying his screen more carefully. Mrs. Walsh, I'm looking at account activity through last week. These funds are very real, and they're legally yours now. Your husband listed you as the primary beneficiary on all accounts. But the medical bills, the mortgage, the funeral expenses could easily be paid from petty cash without touching the principal investments, Mr. Harrison said. Mrs. Walsh, would you like me to print out complete account statements so you can review everything in detail? I nodded, not trusting my voice. While we waited for the printer, my mind raced. If Thomas had millions of dollars, why had Derek been so insistent that we were broke? Why had he rushed me toward assisted living? Why had he already put down a deposit on Sunset Manor without even discussing it with me? The answer, when it hit me, was like ice water in my veins. Derek didn't know about this money, and he was planning to inherit a house he thought was mortgaged to the hilt, never realizing what he was really inheriting. But more importantly, he was trying to get rid of me before I discovered the truth about my own financial situation. Mr. Harrison handed me a stack of papers, thick as a phone book. These are comprehensive statements for all accounts. I'd also recommend meeting with our estate planning attorney to discuss your options going forward. My options? Mrs. Walsh, you're a wealthy woman now. You have choices your husband perhaps didn't want you to know about during his lifetime. The question is, what do you want to do with this second chance? I drove home in a daze, the bank statements on the passenger seat like evidence of a crime. Not a crime against the law, but a crime against truth, against trust, against everything I'd believed about my life. Thomas had been secretly wealthy for 30 years. 30 years of me clipping coupons, shopping clearance sales, worrying about every expense over $50. 30 years of him telling me we needed to be careful with money while he was accumulating millions. But even more disturbing was Derek's behavior. My own son had looked me in the eye and lied about our financial situation. He'd manipulated my grief and confusion to rush me into assisted living, probably hoping to gain control of what he thought was a modest inheritance. What he didn't know was that modest inheritance was actually worth over $8 million. And what Derek definitely didn't know was that his mother was about to stop being the helpless widow who needed taking care of. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house Thomas and I had shared for so long. It wasn't just my home anymore. It was my choice to keep or sell. My decision to make. For the first time since Thomas's death, I smiled. A real smile. My son wanted me to go die somewhere else? Well, Derek was about to learn that his mother wasn't nearly as helpless as he thought, and she definitely wasn't going anywhere. I spent Monday evening spread out on Thomas's office floor with bank statements scattered around me like pieces of a puzzle. Every page revealed another secret, another lie of omission that made my head spin. Real estate investments in Denver, stock portfolios I'd never heard of, a trust fund that had been quietly growing for decades. But what really made my blood boil was the pattern I discovered. Every major decision Thomas had made, every investment, every property purchase, every financial move had been discussed with Derek. The bank records showed regular calls between Thomas and Derek Walsh, financial advisor, dating back 5 years. Derek hadn't just known about the money. He'd been helping Thomas manage it while lying to my face about being broke. My phone rang at exactly 7 a.m. Tuesday morning. Derek, right on schedule. Mom, I need you to sign some papers today for the Sunset Manor deposit and to get the utilities transferred out of your name. I cradled the phone against my shoulder while I sipped my coffee, surrounded by evidence of my family's deception. Actually, Derek, I've been thinking. I'm not ready to move yet. Mom, We've been through this. You don't have a choice. The financial situation is complicated? Yes, you keep saying that. I kept my voice pleasant, conversational. In fact, it's so complicated that I decided to educate myself. I went to a bank yesterday. Dead silence. Derek? Are you there? Which bank? His voice was tight, controlled. First National Private Banking. Lovely people. Very helpful. Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear him calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much damage control he needed to do. Mom, those accounts are... It's not what you think. Really? Because what I think is that my husband secretly accumulated over $8 million while letting me believe we were barely getting by. And what I think is that you've known about this money for years while telling me I need to sell my house and move into assisted living because we're broke. It's more complicated than that. Stop. My voice came out sharper than I'd ever used with him before. Stop telling me it's complicated. Stop treating me like I'm too stupid to understand my own life. And stop lying to me. Derek's carefully controlled facade finally cracked. Fine. Yes, I knew about Dad's money. He made me promise not to tell you because he was worried you'd spend it all on foolish things. He was protecting the family's future. Protecting the family's future from me? His wife of 42 years? Mom, you have no experience with large sums of money. Dad was afraid you'd make emotional decisions, give it all away to charity or fall for scams. He was looking out for you. I almost laughed at the audacity. He was looking out for me by letting me worry about every grocery bill while he had millions in the bank. He was protecting me by keeping me ignorant of my own financial security. Yes, exactly. You've always been too trusting, too generous. Dad knew you'd want to help everyone, give money to the church, pay for the grandchildren's college, donate to every sob story that crossed your path. He was preserving the wealth for the family's real needs. The family's real needs, I see. And I suppose those real needs don't include the actual widow who lived with him for 4 decades? Derek's voice turned cold, businesslike. Mom, you're being emotional. This is exactly why Dad made these decisions. You're proving his point. Emotional. There it was. The word men use to dismiss women's legitimate anger as hysteria. I'd been called emotional for having feelings about discovering my entire marriage was built on financial lies. I'd been called emotional for being upset that my son had conspired to ship me off to assisted living while planning to inherit millions. Derek, I want you to listen very carefully because I'm only going to say this once. I am not moving to Sunset Manor. I am not selling my house. I am not signing any papers you put in front of me. And I am definitely not letting you manage my finances. Mom, you're making a mistake. The mistake was trusting you. I hung up. Within an hour, my doorbell was ringing. Derek stood on my front porch with Sharon, his wife, both of them looking like they were preparing for battle. Mom, we need to talk, Derek said, pushing past me into the house. Sharon followed, her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes, making her look like she was dressed for a country club lunch rather than a family intervention. Margaret, honey, Derek told me about your little visit to the bank. You must be feeling so overwhelmed. Little visit. Feeling overwhelmed. The condescension was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. Actually, Sharon, I'm feeling quite clear-headed for the first time in months. Derek had positioned himself in Thomas's favorite chair, a not-so-subtle power play that made me bristle. Mom, let's be realistic. You've never handled finances. You don't understand investment strategies or estate planning. This money needs professional management. You're absolutely right, I said, settling into my own chair across from them. It does need professional management. I'm meeting with a financial advisor tomorrow morning. Good, Sharon clapped her hands together. Derek can recommend several excellent... Not Derek. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mom? Derek's voice carried a warning tone I'd never heard before. Don't be foolish. Family takes care of family. You can trust me to do what's best. Can I? Because from where I sit, it looks like you've been planning to do what's best for Derek. Not what's best for me. Sharon jumped in with her sugary sweet voice. Margaret, that's not fair. Derek has spent countless hours dealing with your father's affairs, managing all the complicated legal issues. He's been protecting you from stress and paperwork. You wouldn't understand. Protecting me from stress by lying about our finances and trying to force me into assisted living? It's not assisted living. It's an active senior community, Sharon corrected. They have wonderful programs, social activities. You'd make friends your own age. Friends my own age? I repeated slowly. What's wrong with the friends I have now? Derek leaned forward, his patience clearly exhausted. Mom, face facts. Your social circle is dying off. Mrs. Peterson next door can barely drive anymore. Your book club is down to 3 members. You're going to end up isolated and lonely in this big house. So your solution is to isolate me from everything familiar and dump me in an institution? It's not an institution, I know what it is. I stood up, suddenly tired of this conversation. It's convenient. For you. You get to feel like the dutiful son who took care of his mother's future while avoiding the inconvenience of actually taking care of his mother. Derek's face flushed red. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to check how I was doing? When was the last time you visited when you didn't need something? When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of a problem to be solved? Sharon tried to play peacekeeper. Margaret, you're grieving. You're not thinking clearly. Give yourself time to process everything before making rash decisions. I've had plenty of time to process. Sharon, I've processed 30 years of financial lies. I've processed my son's plan to warehouse me in assisted living. I've processed the fact that my own family sees me as a burden instead of a human being. Nobody sees you as a burden, Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? Then prove it. Apologize for lying about our finances. Admit that you were wrong to try to force me into Sunset Manor. Promise that from now on, you'll treat me as an equal partner in decisions about my own life. Derek and Sharon exchanged glances. The silence stretched on until it became an answer in itself. I thought so. I walked to the front door and held it open. I think you should leave now. Mom, you're making a huge mistake, Derek said as he stood up. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not standing up for myself sooner. After they left, I poured myself a glass of Thomas's expensive wine. Wine I'd never been allowed to touch because it was too good for everyday drinking, and sat in his office surrounded by the evidence of our secret wealth. Tomorrow, I would start taking control of my own life. Tonight, I would toast the end of being anyone's convenient victim. I raised my glass to Thomas's empty chair. Here's to secrets, darling. Yours are finally out, and mine are just beginning. For the first time in my adult life, I was rich, independent, and completely free to make my own choices. Derek was right about one thing. I was definitely going to make some decisions he wouldn't like. Wednesday morning found me in a coffee shop downtown, waiting for Victoria Chen, the financial advisor I'd found through an online search specifically for advisors who specialized in helping women manage sudden wealth. I'd deliberately chosen someone Derek wouldn't know, someone who had no connection to his professional network. Victoria arrived precisely on time, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a firm handshake. Mrs. Walsh, I'm sorry for your loss. I understand you've recently discovered some unexpected assets. I slid a folder across the table containing copies of all the bank statements. That's putting it mildly. She reviewed the documents with professional calm, though I caught her eyebrows rise slightly at some of the numbers. This is indeed substantial. And you were completely unaware of these holdings? Completely. My husband managed all our finances for 42 years. I thought we banked at the local credit union and lived paycheck to paycheck. Victoria closed the folder and looked at me directly. Mrs. Walsh, what do you want to do with this money? It was such a simple question, but nobody had asked me that before. Derek had told me what he thought I should do. Thomas had made decisions without consulting me, but nobody had simply asked what I wanted. I want to understand it first, I said. I want to know how much is really there, what my options are, and what kind of life this money can give me. Fair enough. Let's start with the basics. Victoria pulled out a legal pad. You have roughly $2.3 million in liquid assets, savings and checking accounts that you can access immediately. The investment portfolio is worth about $5.8 million, but that's subject to market fluctuations. The real estate holdings need to be appraised, but based on current market values, you're looking at approximately $9 to $10 million total. $9 to $10 million. Even hearing it a second time made my head spin. What kind of annual income would that generate? Conservatively managed, about 300 to 400,000 per year without touching the principal. More aggressively invested could yield higher returns, but with greater risk. 300,000 per year. That was more than Thomas and I had ever made combined during our highest earning years. Mrs. Walsh, may I ask what prompted this financial discovery? You mentioned your son in our phone conversation. I told her the whole story. Derek's lies about being broke, the pressure to move to assisted living, the discovery of the secret accounts, Derek's admission that he'd known all along. Victoria listened without interruption, taking notes. When I finished, she sat back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. Mrs. Walsh, I've worked with several women in similar situations. Wives who discovered their husbands had been controlling their access to their own financial security. The pattern is unfortunately common. So, Thomas wasn't protecting me from making foolish decisions? Thomas was protecting his control. There's a difference. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. Controlling access to financial information is a form of financial abuse, even when it's done by well-meaning husbands who think they know best. Financial abuse. I'd never thought of it that way, but the term fit. Thomas had deliberately kept me ignorant and dependent while accumulating wealth that was legally half mine. As for your son, Victoria continued, his behavior suggests he was planning to inherit your estate while positioning himself as your financial guardian. It's a common scenario when family members assume older women can't manage money. What would you advise me to do? First, secure your assets. Change all passwords, establish new accounts in your name only, and revoke any powers of attorney your son might have. Second, take time to learn about your investments before making any major decisions. Third, decide what kind of life you want to live now that you have the freedom to choose. That afternoon, I met with the estate planning attorney Victoria had recommended, James Morrison. His office was in the same building as Derek's law firm, which gave me a small thrill of satisfaction. Derek might run into me in the elevator and wonder what I was up to. Mrs. Walsh, Mr. Morrison said after reviewing my situation, your husband's estate planning was interesting. He set up the accounts to bypass probate, which means you inherited everything immediately without court oversight. But he also structured things in a way that would have given your son significant control if you had remained unaware of the full assets. How so? Your house, for instance, is titled in a way that would have automatically transferred to your son upon your death. If you had moved to assisted living as he suggested, he would have inherited your most valuable asset while you were still alive. My mouth fell open. Are you saying Derek was trying to steal my house? I'm saying your son positioned himself to inherit your estate while you paid for expensive assisted living out of the resources you didn't know you had. It's legally questionable, but not technically illegal since you would have signed the papers voluntarily. But I would have signed them under false pretenses based on lies about our financial situation. Exactly. Which is why I strongly recommend we restructure everything immediately. We spent 2 hours drafting new documents. A will that reflected my actual wishes. A trust that would protect my assets from anyone trying to manipulate me. Powers of attorney that gave authority only to professionals I chose, not family members who might have conflicts of interest. Mrs. Walsh, Mr. Morrison said as I signed the final papers, these changes give you complete control over your assets and your decisions. No one can force you into assisted living, sell your house, or manage your money without your explicit consent. When I drove home that evening, I felt different. Not just emotionally, but physically. My shoulders were straighter, my grip on the steering wheel more confident. For the first time in my adult life, I was financially independent and legally protected. Derek's car was in my driveway. He was sitting on my front porch swing with a manila folder in his lap, looking like he'd been waiting for a while. When I parked and got out of my car, he stood up with that familiar look of barely controlled impatience. Mom, we need to talk. I brought the Sunset Manor papers for you to sign. I unlocked my front door and walked inside without inviting him to follow. He came in anyway, of course. Derek, I thought I made myself clear yesterday. I'm not moving to Sunset Manor. You're not thinking straight. You're making decisions based on emotion instead of logic. I turned to face him, and something in my expression must have been different because he took a step back. Actually, Derek, I'm making decisions based on facts. Facts I've learned from financial advisors, estate planning attorneys, and banking professionals. Facts you've been hiding from me for years. Derek's face flushed. What attorneys? Mom, you can't trust strangers with family business. They're just trying to sell you expensive services you don't need. The way you were trying to sell me assisted living I didn't need. That's different. I'm your son. I care about your well-being. Do you? I asked quietly. Because caring about my well-being would have meant telling me the truth about our finances. Caring about my well-being would have meant including me in decisions about my own life. Caring about my well-being would have meant treating me like an adult instead of an inconvenient child. Derek slammed the folder down on my kitchen table. Fine. You want the truth? Here's the truth. Dad left you more money than you know how to handle. You're going to get scammed, make stupid investments, give it all away to charities and sob stories. Within 5 years, you'll be broke and expecting me to support you. And if that happened, would you? Would I what? Support me. If I lost everything, would you take care of me? Or would you ship me off to the cheapest nursing home you could find? Derek's silence was my answer. I see. I walked to the kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of water, taking my time. Derek, I want you to leave now. Mom, you're being... I want you to leave. And I want you to take your assisted living papers with you. I won't be needing them. You'll regret this, Derek said, gathering up his folder. When you're broke and alone, don't expect me to bail you out. Don't worry, I replied calmly. I won't expect anything from you ever again. After he left, I sat at my kitchen table and thought about the conversation. Derek hadn't asked how I was feeling about discovering Thomas's lies. He hadn't apologized for his deception. He hadn't shown any concern for my emotional well-being or my grieving process. All he'd cared about was controlling my money and getting me out of the way so he could inherit my house. But Derek had made one crucial miscalculation. He'd assumed that his helpless, financially ignorant mother would remain helpless and ignorant forever. He'd never considered that she might learn, grow, and fight back. Tomorrow, I was going to start showing him just how wrong he'd been. Thursday morning brought an unexpected phone call from Sharon. Margaret, I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday, she said in her sweetest voice. I wondered if we could meet for lunch? Just the two of us? Woman to woman? I almost laughed. Sharon wanted to try the sympathetic female approach after Derek's authoritarian tactics had failed. Of course. Sharon, I'd love to hear what you have to say. We met at Rosewood Bistro, a trendy restaurant where Sharon clearly felt comfortable among the designer handbags and expensive salads. She'd dressed for the occasion in what I recognized as her serious conversation outfit. The navy blazer and pearls she wore when she wanted to project authority mixed with approachability. Margaret, I hope you know that Derek and I only want what's best for you, she began after we'd ordered. This whole situation with the bank accounts has caught everyone off guard. Has it? Because Derek seems to have known about them for quite some time. Sharon's smile faltered slightly. Well, yes, Thomas had mentioned some investments to Derek, but none of us realized the full scope. It's overwhelming, isn't it? All those numbers and financial terms. She was trying to bond with me over the supposed complexity of managing money, assuming I'd be intimidated by all those numbers. Another miscalculation. Actually, Sharon, I'm finding it quite fascinating. Did you know that Thomas bought 3 rental properties without ever mentioning them to me? The rental income alone has been generating about $60,000 a year that I never knew existed. Sharon blinked rapidly, clearly trying to recalculate her approach. That's wonderful. But Margaret, you have to understand, managing rental properties is incredibly complicated. Tenants, maintenance, taxes. Derek has experience with real estate investments. He could help you. The properties are already being managed by a professional company, I interrupted smoothly. They've been handling everything for years, quite successfully, without any help from Derek. Oh, Sharon took a sip of her wine, regrouping. Well, that's good. But what about your living situation? That house is so big for one person. And the upkeep, the yard work, the maintenance. Wouldn't you be happier somewhere smaller, more manageable, like Sunset Manor? Like a nice condo or a senior community where you'd have people your own age to socialize with, someone to check on you if something happened. I smiled, remembering my conversation with Victoria Chen about this exact tactic. Sharon, can I ask you something? When you imagine yourself at my age, do you picture yourself being shipped off to a senior community because your children think you're too old to live in your own home? Sharon's face reddened slightly. It's not the same thing. You've been through a traumatic loss. Thomas took care of everything for so long. It's natural that you'd feel overwhelmed. I'm not overwhelmed, Sharon. I'm angry. Angry? Angry that my husband lied to me for 30 years about our finances. Angry that my son has been planning to inherit my house while shipping me off to assisted living. Angry that both of you seem to think I'm too stupid to manage my own life. Sharon set down her fork and leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Margaret, honey, Derek is worried about you. He thinks you might be making impulsive decisions because you're grieving. Maybe giving money to the wrong people, trusting the wrong advisors. You mean trusting advisors who aren't Derek? I mean trusting strangers who might take advantage of a woman who's just inherited a lot of money. I almost admired the audacity. Sharon was warning me about people taking advantage of me while her husband was actively trying to manipulate me out of my house and my independence. Sharon, let me save you some time. I'm not moving to Sunset Manor. I'm not signing my house over to Derek. I'm not letting him manage my finances. And I'm not going to pretend that any of this is about protecting me when it's clearly about controlling me. Sharon's mask finally slipped completely. Fine. You want to know the truth? That money should be Derek's inheritance. Thomas worked his whole life building that wealth for his family's future. Not so you could waste it on expensive lawyers and financial advisors who are just telling you what you want to hear. Derek's inheritance? I repeated slowly. From money that Thomas earned during our marriage? Money that was legally half mine all along? Thomas never intended for you to have complete control over those assets. He set things up the way he did for a reason. Yes, he did. He set things up to keep me ignorant and dependent. But here's the thing, Sharon. I'm not ignorant anymore. And I'm definitely not dependent. Sharon tried one more approach, her voice turning pleading. Margaret, think about the grandchildren. Michael's college fund, Sophie's violin lessons. That money could secure their futures. The grandchildren, I said thoughtfully. You mean the grandchildren Derek never brings to visit me? The ones I haven't seen since the funeral? The ones you use as emotional blackmail when you want something? That's not fair. What's not fair is using children to manipulate their grandmother. What's not fair is trying to convince a grieving woman that she's too incompetent to live in her own home. What's not fair is lying about finances to force someone into assisted living. I stood up, pulling out my wallet. Lunch is on me, Sharon. It's the least I can do for someone who's about to learn that treating people with respect actually matters. That evening, I called my sister Linda in Portland, something I realized I hadn't done in months. Thomas had never liked me running up the phone bill with long-distance calls, so I'd gotten into the habit of keeping conversations short. Margaret, Linda's voice was warm and surprised. How are you holding up? I've been thinking about you constantly since the funeral. I told her everything. Thomas's secret accounts, Derek's lies, the assisted living manipulation, my meetings with financial advisors and attorneys. Linda listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of outrage. That son of a bitch, she said when I finished. Both of them. Thomas for lying to you all those years, and Derek for trying to take advantage of your grief. Linda, language, I said automatically, then caught myself. Actually, no, you're right. They were both sons of bitches. Linda laughed. There's my sister. I was wondering where she'd gone. Margaret, you know what you need to do now? What? You need to live. Really live. You've got more money than you'll ever spend and complete freedom for the first time in your adult life. What do you want to do with it? I looked around my house, really seeing it for the first time in years. Thomas's chair, his books, his carefully controlled environment where nothing was ever moved or changed. His house, his rules, his decisions. I want to travel, I said suddenly. I've never been anywhere except family vacations Thomas planned. I want to see Italy, Paris, maybe take a cruise. Do it. I want to learn things. Take classes, read books Thomas thought were foolish, maybe even go back to school. Do it. I want to help people. Real people with real needs, not Derek's fictional grandchildren's college funds. Margaret, do you hear yourself? You sound like you're planning to actually live instead of just existing. After I hung up with Linda, I sat in Thomas's office, my office now, and opened my laptop. I'd been thinking about this conversation for days, but Linda's words had crystallized something important. I started typing, "Derek, by the time you read this, I will have transferred the house deed into a trust that you cannot access. I've also changed my will to reflect my actual wishes rather than your assumptions about your inheritance. You were right about one thing. I am going to make some decisions you won't like. I'm going to travel, learn, give money to causes I care about, and live my life exactly as I choose. I'm going to trust my own judgment instead of deferring to men who think they know better. You said I'd regret standing up for myself. You were wrong. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. If you ever decide to treat me like a human being instead of a burden, you know where to find me. Until then, don't bother calling. Your financially independent mother, Margaret." I printed the letter and sealed it in an envelope. Tomorrow, I would mail it. Then I would book a trip to Italy and start planning the rest of my life. Derek had been wrong about something else, too. I wasn't emotional. I was strategic. I was determined. And I was just getting started. My son had wanted me to go die somewhere else? Well, I was going to disappoint him. I was going to live, loudly and completely, right here where he couldn't ignore me. And I was going to enjoy every minute of it. 3 months later, I was sipping espresso in a cafe overlooking the Amalfi Coast when my phone buzzed with yet another call from Derek. I let it go to voicemail, just like I had with the previous 47 calls over the past 12 weeks. Italy was everything I'd dreamed and more. The art, the food, the way the morning light painted the Mediterranean in shades of gold and turquoise. I'd enrolled in a cooking class in Tuscany, learned to paint watercolors in Rome, and discovered that I had a natural talent for languages. Who knew? Certainly not the woman who'd spent 40 years believing she was too old to learn new things. "Signora Margaret," called Giuseppe, the cafe owner who'd become my friend. "You look happy today." "Every day, Giuseppe. Every single day." And it was true. For the first time in my adult life, I woke up each morning wondering what I wanted to do instead of what I needed to do for someone else. The freedom was intoxicating. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Sharon. "Margaret, Derek is very worried about you. Please call him." I typed back, "Derek is worried about my money, not me. There's a difference." 20 minutes later, another text. "The children miss their grandmother." I almost laughed. "Tell the children they can visit me in Italy. I'd love to show them the Colosseum." No response to that one. The truth was, I'd been sending the grandchildren postcards from every city I visited, along with care packages of Italian chocolates and small gifts. Not once had Derek allowed them to call and thank me. He was using them as weapons, but he'd forgotten that weapons can be taken away from people who don't know how to handle them properly. That evening, back in my lovely hotel room in Positano, I video-called Linda. "You look amazing," she said immediately. "Tanned, relaxed. Italy agrees with you." "Italy agrees with independence," I corrected. "Though the food doesn't hurt." "Any word from Derek?" Daily calls I don't answer and increasingly desperate texts from Sharon. They're realizing I'm not coming home to play the helpless widow. Linda grinned. "Good for you. But Margaret, you can't stay in Europe forever." "Why not? I have more money than I can spend in 3 lifetimes. I can live anywhere I want. Because you're an American woman with roots, not a permanent tourist. And because Derek needs to learn that his actions have consequences." She was right, of course. Running away to Italy was lovely, but it wasn't really solving the problem. Derek was still telling people I was having a mental breakdown, still positioning himself as the concerned son dealing with his unstable mother. Victoria Chen had been sending me updates on his activities, and they weren't pretty. "Linda, what if I told you I was thinking about moving back home and really shaking things up?" "I'd say it's about time. What did you have in mind?" "Well," I said, settling back against my pillows with a glass of Chianti, "I've been thinking about what this town really needs, and what Derek really deserves." The next morning, I booked my flight home. 2 weeks later, I was back in my own house, but everything had changed. Not the house itself, that was exactly the same. I was what had changed. 3 months of freedom, of making my own decisions, of being treated like an intelligent adult, had transformed me completely. Derek showed up within hours of my return, of course. He must have had someone watching the house. "Mom, thank God you're home." He tried to hug me, but I stepped back. We were so worried, disappearing like that without telling anyone your plans. I told you my plans. You just didn't like them. Running off to Europe isn't a plan, it's escapism. You can't solve your problems by running away from them. I poured myself coffee in my own kitchen, marveling at how small and dark it seemed after the sun-drenched cafes of the Mediterranean. Actually, Derek, I wasn't running away from my problems. I was running toward my solutions. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've had 3 months to think about what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I've made some decisions. Derek's face tensed. What kind of decisions? I'm starting a foundation. The color drained from his face. A what? A charitable foundation. The Margaret Walsh Foundation for Women's Independence. We'll provide financial literacy education, legal assistance, and temporary housing for women escaping controlling relationships. Derek sat down heavily at my kitchen table. Mom, you can't give away Dad's money to strangers. It's not Dad's money anymore, Derek. It's mine. And I'm not giving it away. I'm investing it in something that matters. You're not thinking clearly. This is exactly what Dad was afraid of. You're making emotional decisions without understanding the financial implications. I pulled out a thick folder from my briefcase and set it in front of him. Actually, I understand the implications perfectly. Victoria Chen helped me structure everything properly. Tax advantages, operational efficiency, maximum impact. We've already filed the paperwork. Derek opened the folder and his face went white as he read. $5 million? You're putting $5 million into this. This charity? Initial funding? Yes. There's also a building. What building? I bought the old Morrison department store downtown. We're renovating it into a women's center, legal aid clinic, job training programs, childcare facilities, temporary apartments for women in transition. Derek was staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. You bought a building? When? Last month, while I was in Italy. Amazing what you can accomplish with modern technology. This is insane. You're throwing away the family's financial security on some feminist project. Feminist project? I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. Derek, helping women escape financial abuse is a feminist project, the same way helping people escape burning buildings is a fire safety project. It's basic human decency. But $5 million, Mom. That's Michael and Sophie's college money. That's our family's future. There it was again. Our family's money. Michael and Sophie's inheritance. As if I were merely the temporary custodian of wealth that rightfully belonged to Derek and his children. Derek, let me explain something to you. Michael is 8 years old. Sophie is 6. By the time they're ready for college, the foundation will have helped hundreds of women rebuild their lives. The remaining $3 million in my portfolio will still be earning income. And if they want college money, they can visit their grandmother who actually cares about them instead of using them as emotional blackmail. Derek's face was turning red, the way it used to when he was a child having a tantrum. You're doing this to punish me. I'm doing this because it's what I want to do with my life and my money. The fact that you see it as punishment says more about your priorities than mine. Dad would be rolling in his grave. Dad, I said calmly, spent 30 years lying to me about our finances while accumulating wealth he never intended to share with his own wife. I'm not particularly concerned about his posthumous opinions. Derek slammed his hand down on the table. You're destroying everything he worked for. No, Derek. I'm building something better. That's when the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see a sheriff's deputy standing on my porch with papers in his hand. Derek and I looked at each other, both wondering who could be getting served with legal papers. Turns out, it was Derek. The deputy handed him a thick envelope and explained that he was being served with a lawsuit from the state attorney general's office regarding misappropriation of client funds from his law practice. Derek's face went ashen as he read the papers. His hands were shaking. Mom, this is what, Derek? It's a misunderstanding, a bookkeeping error. The money was just borrowed temporarily to cover some cash flow issues. Borrowed from client accounts? It's not what it looks like. I was planning to pay it back as soon as Dad's estate was settled. I thought the inheritance would cover everything. And there it was. The truth, finally. Derek hadn't been trying to protect me from financial decisions. He'd been trying to access my inheritance to cover his own financial crimes. How much money are we talking about, Derek? It's complicated. How much? $800,000. I stared at my son, my successful lawyer son who'd spent months lecturing me about financial responsibility, and realized he'd been planning to steal my inheritance to cover his embezzlement. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "Mom, please, I can explain." "Get out of my house, Derek, and don't come back." After he left, I sat in my kitchen and laughed until I cried. Derek had spent so much time trying to convince me I was too incompetent to manage money while he was literally stealing from his clients. The irony was too perfect to be accidental. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about justice. The scandal broke in the local newspaper 3 days later. Prominent attorney under investigation for client fund misappropriation. Derek's mugshot was on the front page, looking haggard and defeated. I was having coffee with my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, when she brought me the paper. "Oh my goodness, Margaret," she said, her eyes wide with shock. "Did you know about this?" "I found out the same time you did, Helen, when the deputy served him papers in my kitchen." "But surely you'll help him. He's your son, and you have all that money now." I set down my coffee cup carefully. This was the conversation I'd been expecting, the one where people assumed I'd bail Derek out because that's what mothers do. "Helen, if your son stole money from people who trusted him, would you reward that behavior by giving him more money to steal?" "Well, no, but family is family. Family doesn't steal from clients and then try to steal their mother's inheritance to cover it up." Mrs. Peterson looked confused. "What do you mean?" I told her the whole story. Derek's lies about our finances, his attempt to force me into assisted living, his plan to inherit my house while I paid for expensive care with money I didn't know I had. "So you see," I concluded, "Derek wasn't protecting me from bad financial decisions. He was making bad financial decisions and planning to use my money to fix them." "My goodness," Mrs. Peterson murmured. "I had no idea. Most people didn't. Derek is very good at managing his image." That afternoon, Sharon showed up at my door. She looked terrible. Hair disheveled, makeup smeared, clothes wrinkled like she'd been wearing them for days. "Margaret, please," she said before I could even say hello. "Derek needs help. The legal fees alone are going to bankrupt us. Come in, Sharon." I led her to the living room, noting how she looked around at my house like she was calculating its value. "Derek made mistakes," she continued, perching on the edge of my sofa. "But he's not a criminal. He was just trying to keep his practice afloat during a difficult time. By stealing $800,000 from client accounts. It wasn't stealing. It was borrowing. He was going to pay it back. With my inheritance money." Sharon's composure cracked. "Margaret, we're going to lose everything. The house, the kids' school, Derek's practice, everything we've worked for. And what do you want me to do about that? Help us. Loan us the money to pay back the clients. Derek can rebuild his practice, pay you back with interest." I studied Sharon's face, seeing the desperation she was trying to hide. "Sharon, let me ask you something. 3 months ago, when Derek was trying to force me into assisted living, did you think that was wrong?" "What? That's not relevant now." "It's completely relevant. You supported your husband's plan to manipulate a grieving widow out of her home and her independence. You helped him lie about our finances. You tried to convince me I was too incompetent to manage my own life. We thought we were helping. You thought you were inheriting my house and my money." "There's a difference." Sharon's desperation turned to anger. "Fine. You want to be vindictive? You want to destroy your own family over money? I'm not destroying my family, Sharon. Derek destroyed his family when he decided to steal from his clients and manipulate his mother. Those clients don't need the money. Most of them are wealthy. They'll never miss it. But Derek's your son, your flesh and blood." I almost admired her audacity. She was literally arguing that Derek's theft was acceptable because his victims were wealthy, while asking me to give her money because she wasn't. "Sharon, I want you to listen carefully because I'm only going to say this once. I will not give Derek money to cover his crimes. I will not mortgage my future to enable his irresponsibility. And I will not pretend that stealing is acceptable because the victims can afford it. You're heartless," she spat, standing up abruptly. "Your own son is facing prison, and you're worried about protecting your precious money. My son is facing prison because he committed crimes, not because I refused to bail him out. There's a difference between heartless and having boundaries. Don't expect us to be there for you when you're old and need help." I smiled. Sharon, I'm already old. And the last thing I need is help from people who think manipulation is love and theft is acceptable if it benefits the family. After she left, I called Victoria Chen to update her on Derek's legal troubles. I'm not surprised, Victoria said. Men who try to control their female relatives' finances often have problems managing their own money. It's about power, not competence. Should I be worried about him trying to access my accounts somehow? All your assets are protected now. He has no legal standing to touch anything. But Margaret, I should warn you. Desperate people do desperate things. Make sure your home security is updated. That evening, I had new locks installed and a security system activated. I thought Derek's manipulation was the worst he could do. I was about to learn how wrong I was. The break-in happened on a Tuesday night in November. I'd been home from Italy for 6 weeks, and Derek's legal troubles were getting worse. His law license had been suspended. The state bar was pursuing criminal charges, and several clients had filed civil lawsuits. I was awakened at 2 a.m. by the sound of glass breaking downstairs. My first thought was that a tree branch had fallen through a window. We'd been having severe storms all week. Then I heard footsteps. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 while creeping toward my bedroom door to listen. 2 voices, both male, moving through my house like they knew the layout. Office is down the hall. Safe should be behind the painting. They were looking for something specific. They knew about Thomas's old office, knew about the safe he'd installed behind his Civil War painting. 911, what's your emergency? This is Margaret Walsh at 247 Elm Street, I whispered into the phone. Someone has broken into my house. Are you safe? Can you get to a secure location? I'm upstairs in my bedroom with the door locked. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line with me. I could hear them downstairs, drawers being opened, furniture being moved, the safe door creaking open. Whoever was down there knew exactly where to look and how to open Thomas's safe. Then I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. It's not here. The papers aren't here. Derek. My own son had broken into my house in the middle of the night. Check the file cabinets, said another voice, one I didn't recognize. They spent 20 minutes searching Thomas's office while I sat in my bedroom, phone clutched in my hand, listening to my son commit another felony in my house. Police sirens finally wailed in the distance, getting closer. I heard rapid footsteps, then the back door slamming. Ma'am, this is Officer Rodriguez. Police are on scene. Are you injured? No, I'm fine. They ran when they heard the sirens. It took 2 hours to process the scene. The police dusted for fingerprints, photographed the damage, took my statement. They found crowbar marks on the back door and glass from the kitchen window scattered across the floor. Mrs. Walsh, Officer Rodriguez said as they finished up, you said you recognized one of the voices. Are you certain it was your son? Absolutely certain. I've been listening to Derek's voice for 45 years. And you want to press charges? I thought about that question for a long moment. Pressing charges meant Derek would face additional felony counts on top of the embezzlement case. It meant our relationship would be permanently destroyed. It meant admitting publicly that my own son had burglarized my house. Yes, I said firmly. I want to press charges. The next morning, Derek was arrested at his house and charged with breaking and entering, burglary, and criminal mischief. The newspapers had a field day with the story. Embezzlement suspect arrested for burglarizing mother's home. Sharon called me screaming. How could you do this to him? He's your son. He broke into my house in the middle of the night, Sharon. What did you expect me to do? He was just looking for some papers that belonged to your father. Something that might help with his legal defense. What papers? Insurance documents. Something that might show your father had been planning to help Derek with business expenses. I almost laughed. Derek had been looking for some mythical document that would prove Thomas had approved his theft. When that didn't exist, he decided to create his own evidence. Sharon, there are no papers that would justify stealing $800,000 from client accounts. You don't understand the pressure he's been under. The stress of trying to manage his practice, take care of his family, and worry about your erratic behavior. My erratic behavior? Running off to Europe without telling anyone, starting this foundation, refusing to help your own family? Derek's been telling everyone you're having some kind of mental breakdown. And there it was, Derek's backup plan. If he couldn't manipulate me into giving him money, he'd convince everyone I was mentally unstable. He'd been laying the groundwork for months, telling people my behavior was erratic, that I was making irrational decisions, that someone needed to step in and take control of my finances for my own protection. "Sharon," I said calmly, "Derek is facing federal charges for embezzling money from his clients. He broke into my house in the middle of the night looking for documents that don't exist. Who exactly is having the mental breakdown here?" The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. "Sharon, this isn't over, Margaret. You think you're so smart, but you're just a bitter old woman destroying her own family. And you're an enabler married to a criminal. I guess we both have our roles to play." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and realized something profound. I felt relieved. For months, I'd been carrying the burden of Derek's lies, Sharon's manipulations, and my own guilt about standing up for myself. Now that Derek had shown his true character so completely, so publicly, so criminally, I was finally free from any obligation to protect him from the consequences of his actions. My son had made his choices. Now he could live with them. But I had one more choice to make, and it was going to surprise everyone. 6 months later, I was standing in the main hall of the newly opened Margaret Walsh Center for Women's Independence, watching 37 women and their children celebrate the center's official dedication. The old Morrison building had been transformed beyond recognition. Bright, modern apartments filled the upper floors. The ground level housed the legal aid clinic, job training classrooms, and a childcare center that buzzed with happy voices throughout the day. "Margaret, this is incredible," said Linda, who'd flown in from Portland for the opening. "You've created something amazing here." I smiled, watching a young mother I'll call Sarah playing with her toddler in the center's courtyard. 6 weeks ago, Sarah had arrived at our emergency intake with nothing but the clothes on her back and a black eye that was just beginning to fade. Today, she was starting her new job as a paralegal at our legal clinic, living in her own apartment, planning a future that didn't include fear. "It's not just about the money," I told Linda. "It's about showing women that they have choices they didn't know existed." "Speaking of choices," Linda said, Linda, glancing toward the entrance. "Look who decided to show up." Derek was standing in the doorway, looking older and more haggard than when I'd seen him 6 months ago. The criminal charges had been plea bargained down to restitution and community service, but his law license was permanently revoked. Last I'd heard, he was working as a paralegal for a small firm across town. He approached us hesitantly, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Mom," he said quietly, could I talk to you privately?" Linda squeezed my arm. "I'll go get us some coffee." Derek and I walked to a quiet corner of the main hall, near the memorial wall where we'd hung photos of women who'd rebuilt their lives with the center's help. "This is really something," Derek said, looking around at the bustling activity. "I had no idea." "No idea what?" "No idea you were capable of something like this. This big, this important." I studied my son's face, seeing genuine remorse for the first time in months. "Derek, why are you here?" "To apologize. To really apologize. Not just say words because I think it's what you want to hear." "Go ahead." Derek took a deep breath. "I was wrong about everything. Wrong about your capabilities. Wrong about your judgment. Wrong about what you needed. I treated you like you were my responsibility instead of my mother. And I'm sorry. And I was planning to use your money to cover my mistakes. I convinced myself it was temporary, that I was protecting the family's assets. But really, I was just scared and desperate and looking for someone else to fix my problems." It was the first honest thing Derek had said to me in years. What happened to the man who wanted to put his mother in assisted living because she was too incompetent to manage her own finances? I asked. Derek's face reddened. That man was an arrogant ass who thought success in one area meant he was qualified to make decisions for everyone else. And the break-in? Desperation and stupidity. I thought if I could find some document that showed Dad had planned to help with my business, I could justify what I'd done. It was criminal, and I'm ashamed. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the women and children who'd found safety and hope in this place I'd built with Thomas's secret money. "Derek, do you know why your father really kept those accounts secret? I assumed it was to protect the money from poor investment decisions. That's what he told you, but I found something in his papers after you were arrested. Letters from a financial advisor dating back to the early 1990s. Derek looked confused. What kind of letters? Your father wasn't just accumulating wealth, Derek. He was hiding it from the IRS. About half of that $8 million should have been reported as income over the years. Thomas was committing tax evasion on a massive scale. Derek's face went white. What? The secret accounts. The offshore investments. The cash transactions. Your father was essentially running a tax avoidance scheme. When I found the evidence, I hired a tax attorney and negotiated a settlement with the IRS. That's why I only put $5 million into the foundation. The other $3 million went to back taxes and penalties. So your father was a criminal. Derek, just like you became. The difference is, he never got caught. Derek stared at me with a mixture of shock and something that might have been relief. So you weren't protecting family money. You were cleaning up family crimes. I was taking dirty money and using it for something clean. This center, these women's lives, the children who'll grow up safe because their mothers had somewhere to go. That's Thomas's real legacy now. Derek looked around the bustling center with new eyes. This is actually incredible, Mom. You turned Dad's lies into something honest. I turned his control into freedom. For me, and for everyone, this place helps. We talked for another hour. Really talked, for the first time since Thomas's funeral. Derek told me about his struggles with his legal practice, his fear of failure, his desperate attempt to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't afford. I told him about the loneliness of my marriage, the slow erosion of my confidence, the way Thomas's financial control had made me doubt my own judgment about everything. Mom, Derek said finally, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I've burned bridges that maybe can't be rebuilt, but I want you to know that what you've done here, standing up for yourself, building something this meaningful, I'm proud of you. Are you? I'm proud, and I'm ashamed that it took me so long to see who you really are instead of who I thought you should be. That evening, after everyone had gone home and the center was quiet, I sat in my office and thought about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd been a grieving widow being manipulated out of her home by her own son. Today, I was the founder of a thriving organization that had already helped dozens of women escape situations like the one I'd unknowingly lived in for decades. Thomas had controlled me with money I didn't know existed. Derek had tried to control me with lies about money I didn't know I had. But in the end, that same money had bought me something neither of them had ever expected me to want: independence. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, the young mother who'd started work as our paralegal. Mrs. Walsh, thank you for showing me that being strong isn't the same as being alone. Maria took her first steps today, and I thought you should know. I smiled, thinking about Maria's first steps, and my own first steps toward the life I was meant to live. Derek had told me to go die somewhere else. Instead, I'd learned how to live somewhere better. I'd learned that 68 isn't too old to start over, that wisdom is more powerful than manipulation, and that the best revenge against people who underestimate you is proving them spectacularly wrong. I'd learned that I was never really Thomas's helpless wife or Derek's burden of a mother. I was Margaret Walsh, teacher, foundation founder, champion of women's independence, and survivor of my own family's lies. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the cruelest betrayals lead to the most unexpected discoveries. About money, about power, about what it really means to be free. And I was just getting started. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.